April the 6th. It's the 6th day. Welcome everybody. All two of you. So if you do a show for a whole decade and then some, and you can get 2 people on your live stream, you have reached the pinnacle of your video making. Oh, I'll take that back. I got 1 person on my show. The heartless Google censor, nuclear industry lobby and censor groups are in fine form tonight, I see. Welcome everybody, or welcome person. If you only got 1, you can't see everybody because it's just 1. And I've got an amazing show for everybody tonight. Tons and tons of news. Oodles and oodles and oodles of news. I'm just going to see what's going on here. Government funded study, United States government, West Coast and Hawaii residents are Fukushima downwinders. But the effects of the radiation fallout, her cases, man, are expected to be beneficial. So the plume covered the whole planet. There's nothing beneficial about anthropogenic man-made radiation. I gotta screw up my glasses here. Hang on. I was so excited to start the show I forgot to clean them. But that was like hard on my mind when I was getting ready to go live. Don't forget to clean your glasses, Dana. Guess what I forgot to do? Guess what I forgot to do? Bear with me. I gotta set up. It always takes me a minute to get up to bashing speed. Anybody want to guess where that study came from? We got a poll. Oh, wait for a second. Is carbon-free and net zero nuclear a scam to prop up the failing disease factories known as nuclear power plants? Well, yes, it is, Dana. That's not really 11 on my show. That's 3. You got to add it up. So 2 and 1 is 3, see? So it's not actually 12. There's 3 people on my show. Google's trying to make me look good by giving me 12 people. U.S. government-funded study, the effects of the radiation exposure. And nobody tried to guess. Did anybody try to guess where that study came from? No. Probably too soon to check. I'm going to give up the ghost anyway. Loveless Respiratory Research Institute. Loveless Respiratory Research Institute. News media misinformation related to emergency triggered enormous social fear worldwide of radioactivity is being released for downwind population homeostasis effects activated natural protective processes. So if there's a nuclear meltdown, everybody should run to the nuclear meltdown so you can be protected. Gotcha. Will activate natural protective processes is much more likely than deleterious effects, which are harmful effects, I guess. For downwind populations, don't worry. It's going to activate your natural protective processes. This is Loveless Respiratory Research Institute. Now, if you go look up the studies on Loveless Respiratory Research Institute, they don't actually claim that it's harmless. In fact, all the studies that they got, like Dr. Raymond Gilmade, he's one of their so-called scientists, mass beagle puppy mass murderer. shows in 144 beagle dogs and puppies, tumors, when they were given plutonium, tumors of the lungs, the skeletons, the livers, occurred beginning with 3 years after the exposure. And that bone tumors were found in 93 dogs, were the most common cause of death. Lung tumors in 48, 6 dogs were the second most common cause of death. And liver tumors found in 20 dogs were the cause of death in only 2 dogs, but occurred later than the tumors in the bones and the lungs. So they got 3 different tumors from the plutonium. By the way, for children, that mutates their stem cells right away. Humans are 50 times less efficient than animals at filtering, for the kidney to filter out radiation. Animals are 50 times more efficient at removing the particles than humans are. Now, this was a lot of radiation. This was a continuous plume covering the entire planet. Head of Tokyo Fukushima Health Study. This is the guy in charge of the health studies. He's probably best friends with the guys and the creatures, rather, from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico. Says that 100 millisieverts a year is okay for pregnant moms. That the effects of radiation do not come to people that are happy. They come to people that are weak-spirited. So if you're happy, radiation can't hurt you. And if you're in the radioactive fallout zone, don't worry. It'll activate your natural protective defenses in your body. These people should be arrested immediately and put into like a 2-foot by 4-foot box and left there to rot. Japan teachers, students being taught pro-nuclear propaganda are told radiation risk is less than dying of old age. Like, the industry has absolutely the industry is crazy, I guess is the best way to put it. We've never come across anybody in the industry that was anything but crazy. Rain with 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131 per liter fell on the U.S. This was just one study. It never, as you know, you've seen the plumes, it never stopped coming, right? It was a continuous plumes covering the whole planet in 19 days. I'm just trying to get you on the right bandwidth, brainwave, I should say, of the rest of the show. So there's 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, 31 times more iodine 129s. These are all iodines I'm talking about. For every iodine 131 that's produced, and would have been in the same sample. In other words, the iodine 132, by the way, 133, are 9 times more effective at ionizing and radiating thyroid glands of insects and birds and animals and children and every creature than the 131 iodines are, which are unbelievably effective. And again, so there's 31 times more iodine 129 you would expect, and that showed up in a separate study. That study was from Ottawa, Canada, by the way. There was also an unprecedented phenomenon from using salt water. This was... So when you spray anything on these reactors, 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, it's going to atomize an aerosol it and ionize and radiate it. And so it's going to release that in form of plume. And if you spray water all day, salt water in particular, you create a phenomenon known as the sulfur peroxide hydrogens buckyballs. And they can ingest, these are like spherical balls, like soccer balls, except they're microscopic. They can ingest, so to speak, uranium, plutonium, americium, everything else, and become super hot particles that are highly mobile, don't need conventional ways to cross oceans, like the jet stream, for instance. Extraordinarily energetic, very, very deadly. These are adjective elements where they get in your body, and your body attacks it relentlessly with white blood cells for the rest of your life. And then one of these examples was 1,500 atoms of the sulfur per meter. That's, and they knew about this in the 50s from the ocean detonations from the nuclear war. Like they had Castle Bravo, for instance, the Bikini Atolls, was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki because it was a plutonium bomb going off at the same time. So, if you got two countries firing 500 Hiroshima, Nagasaki type bombs at each other, is that a nuclear war? Just because they don't do it in anger, by the way, it's the same bomb with the same radioactive fallout. So it's a nuclear war. It's, for me and you, it's the animosity equivalent of a nuclear war. Fukushima is nearly as serious as being attacked by nuclear weapons. If facts were known, all the citizens might have left Tokyo. Not might have, they would have left if they had known what really happened. Death River. Radiation detector goes over limit in Fukushima City, which is over 300,000 people there. Every house there qualifies for decontamination, which means you should never be there under any circumstances. 430,000 becquerels a kilogram of just gamma cesium. %43% of children have thyroid abnormalities. So does this sound like a hormesis effect, or does it sound like it's a lethal effect? 43% of the kids have thyroid abnormalities in new Fukushima City test results. Out of 42,000 children, 43%. Now, pre-nuclear meltdowns in Japan, it was maybe 1 or 2 per million children would have thyroid issues. Almost all thyroid issues can be traced directly back to radioactive fallout worldwide. Not almost. As far as I know, all of them can. They know all over 5 million becquerels a square meter of cesium. Again, cesium, which is really bad, but it's meant to distract you from the actual danger stuff like curium isotopes. Japanese radiation professor, Fukushima City needs to be evacuated. Needs to be evacuated. I'm just trying to get you up to speed. Cesium, and so if they're only going to acknowledge cesium, they should lose their degree, right? They should never be allowed to participate in the conversation, and they actually should serve time in jail because they manipulated hundreds of thousands of people to stay in danger zone and becoming sick and dying eventually because of it. So it's mass murder. It's genocide to only acknowledge cesium. With 349 million becquerels a square kilometer in 1 day from Fukushima, 40-fold increase from the previous 24-hour period. Leaders of Fukushima City refused to evacuate the population of 400,000. By the way, let me go back a step. 5 million becquerels a square meter was Fukushima City. So 35.8% of the Fukushima children with thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters, but the thyroid gland is only 3 by 5 centimeters. So it's almost the width, the tumors we're talking about for the children. There's bigger tumors than what I'm talking about. But the average tumor was 2 centimeters on the thyroid gland. And the thyroid gland meant it was so much radiation that it was now producing radioactive hormones also. On 38,114, is it, or something? 38,100 children. It used to be 1 per million. So when you scale it up, it's 358,000 per million. Public authorities avoiding details that may trigger alarm or panic. They don't want to go there. So Loveless saying that it's going to trigger your natural defense. Loveless should be torn down, which is a government military-industrial complex, nuclear disease factory in the United States in Albuquerque. There's 865,000 extra cancers in Japan. 865,000 extra cancers. Okay, so let's get into the news. I just want you to see another side to the crazies. Alright. Radithor, people who drank that stuff back in the... We'll cover that story, I think, right away, actually. So the nuclear industry's got this long history of radium makeup, radium lipstick, radium eyeshadow, radium toothpaste, radium soap, and the list goes, radium suppositories, the list goes on and on and on. And all of it's deadly to whoever used it. And the industry knew it. So when you go all the way back through their history, you end up here. And they were so vicious, so hateful, so disgusting, that they were actually perpetrating this as much as they could. And this was lethal, vicious, brutal way to die is poisoning by the heavy concentrated radium. William Bailey dissolved radium in water to create an energy drink. Of course, this has got none. There's no such thing as an energy drink with this stuff, which was just one piece of the American frenzy. Over the newly discovered element. Now, they knew this was dangerous. I remember Marie Curie lost both of her hands to this radiation. An industrialist was rumored to have consumed 1,400 bottles because of back pain and joint pain. Eventually, his teeth began falling out and bone tissue started to disintegrate. His jaw fell off. They tore it off, actually. Well, they took it off, but he died a miserable death. The Federal Trade Commission in 1931 filed a cease and desist order against Bailey Radium Laboratories. They knew it was lethal. The man should have been prosecuted and executed for genocide, right? But the nuclear industry allowed it to happen. That's the legacy of the nuclear industry. That's the legacy of the nuclear industry. Excuse me. Let's keep her rolling. We got a poll. Is carbon-free and net zero nuclear scam to prop up the failing disease factories known as nuclear power plants? Well, yes, they are, Dana. We got 100%. Stunningly overwhelming correct vote. Duke Energy to test warning sirens. Oh, I don't know where I put that. I don't know if I can find it anymore. No. Normally I have a siren sounder waiting for me. Why my voice so scratchy now? Oh, right, let's keep her going here. We'll get through it. Should have made a cup of tea to soothe the throat. And so every time I see one of these headlines, first off, they're never going to use the siren if there's a release. Monticello is a prime example of that. They waited 4 months and they still didn't use the siren. 4 months and claimed it was tritium. This is crazy stuff, but that could actually happen. There's no one to hold them accountable. Every university knows they're lying. Every single university knows they're lying. Not one of them is going to dare speak out. Well, not one of them would dare, because they tell the same lies. So they probably got 100 sirens around this place that were put there because of 3 Mile Island by activists forced into legislation. The warning sirens, but they don't tell you in this story how many sirens that they have around that particular disease factory. The Robinson Nuclear Disease Factory. Testing is performed in cooperation with emergency officials in Chesterfield, Darlington, and Lee counties, who are responsible for sounding the siren, who are getting kickbacks. But these are not nuclear experts, right? They're being told, they get told by the nuclear power plant when to use the siren. In other words, it'll never get used. Because all of a sudden the nuclear plant gets a black eye, and they're simply not allowed to use the sirens. The industry can't survive an actual release again. Fukushima had probably finished them, no doubt. How a Canadian small reactor will support industrial decarbonization. This is a revolting story with Will. His friends call him the goat. Billy. Billy Goat, that is. Nuclear power industry is banking on developing the small reactors that don't exist. They don't exist. This so-called company with the small modular reactor industry is just a 100% hype. Why are you using small reactors when you can use geothermal? Why would you do something like that? And the small, so-called fabled unicorn small reactors got to run on mixed oxide fuel, which is illegal in Canada, by the way. So they can't exist without the small modular or mixed oxide fuel, which is illegal. They don't exist. They don't even have a patent into the non-regulatory agencies. But they got an agreement in which Invest Alberta, instead of supporting real industries, is going to support something that don't exist. It's a 100% scam. And so is Ontario, Saskatchewan. Now Canada's been captured a long time ago. You can tell he's a piece of shit just looking at him. You can tell he's a revolting parasite. You can tell that that's the last person you want anything to do when you look at him. A sodium-cooled fast reactor, really. They're like Moltex. They're complete vaporware. We truly want the children born today to inherit a healthier planet. That's this guy, Billy, right there. Or as his friends call him, scumbag. And they give you these cartoonish pictures. Fabled pictures. And they even have the arrogance to put a windmill in the right-hand side. This is only about dubbing the investors, right? Ripping off the Canadians. And they don't even have an application, so why should anybody take them serious? They've been around a long time. They don't even have an application in for the licensing. They don't have a design in for scrutiny. Why do they put... The only reason they're putting these stories out there is to suck money out of the Canadian government, out of the taxpayers, rather. Canadian government is happy to give it away, as long as not for a good cause. And net zero, you see that over and over and over in the story, includes expansion of hydro, wind, solar, and degenerate nuclear. You can't conflate nuclear with actual renewable energy, scumbags. Wind and solar are renewable, but intermittent. Again, right, like Terra Power is going to have energy storage because wind and solar is not always available. So when the wind and solar doesn't supply it, the nuclear power plant will have energy storage there to help you out, rather than the wind and solar to have their own energy storage. Only nuclear can have energy storage, especially Canada. Canada closed 700 renewable solar farms and wind farms last year in Ontario. Gave the $4.2 billion they had for storage for renewables to Bruce Power. Nuclear power. It's just, how the hell did we get this stupid and this, and how did we ever get in a position where they can just rob us and nobody even says a word? How can they even look in a mirror is the biggest question. Billy says, we identified several industrial processes that can leverage the ARC-100, which doesn't exist. They don't even have a designed into the regulatory agencies. Our team is crossing the globe, spending the money the investors gave them to build a reactor, come up with a design, responding to strong interest from business, governments, and regulators. Our reactor is versatile and scalable and doesn't exist. Like, how can creatures like this say stuff like that when reactors don't even exist? It don't even exist on paper. I think people like that should be shipped to Fukushima Reactor 3 so we don't have to deal with them no more. $10,000, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization never takes a break, I noticed. $10,000 donation to keep youth in sports in nuclear waste, Northwest Ontario. This is from the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. What is it? They got $24 billion in 2002. They expect to have a repository in about 60 years from now. Total will be about 80 years from the time they got the money. What? They can't have it. Now they're going to have a referendum, they say, where they're to. So they're giving money away to one organization, one side of the community, but nothing to the other side of the community, so that when they do have a referendum, it'll never go through, and then they have to start the whole process over. It takes another 20 years to look for somewhere else. So they're not trying to come up with a solution at all. They bought 1,500 acres of prime farmland, because you can't have nuclear without farmland, because everything is hemorrhaging and vented into the environment, so you need farms to move it out of the area all the time. So why are you calling people officials that have never done nothing? Why would you call these people officials from Nuclear Waste Management Organization? How can you actually call people like that officials? How does that actually work? They probably tell their family, well, I'm official with the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. The non-Nuclear Waste Management Organization is proud to work with making connections for children and youth. They're proud to be scumbags. Proud not to do nothing, only give money away and divide the community. Got $23 billion now, because you probably spent $1 billion already, for storage, not to give away to different organizations and communities that you're trying to hoodwink. What? And we've seen, like, they're giving away millions here and $1 million there and $500,000 here and another $500,000 there, and every week or 2 weeks there's another one of these headlines. Oh, we'll get around to building a repository in 50 or 60 years. Dana, don't worry about it. We're the Nuclear Waste Scumbag Organization. They had an international experience on display at the Nuclear Waste Forum here in Canada. Think about that statement there. International experience. And they packed the house. Canada may soon be following in Finland's footstep of building their own deep geological repository. Well, they're partnered up with them, aren't they? It could end up under 1,500 acres of farmland near Tewater, Ontario, that they bought a couple of years ago. Farmland. Are we seeing a pattern? Hang on, I'll show you a pattern. It's 490. I wish they wouldn't do that because it creates so much work for me. I don't think it's fair that I have to work so hard because they're such scumbags. That's the cards, though. We're drawed. Not much I can do about it. There we go. I think it's really interesting that almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms, don't you? And they get tons of studies saying that's a stupid idea. No, little farm here, little farm there. Got a farm, got a nuclear plant, got to have a farm. Can't have a plant without a farm, Dana. How else are you going to move the radiation away from the local areas? How are we going to kill the kids far away without the farm, Dana? That's a pretty good point, scumbag. Yeah, you got me. I got no answer, finally. Probably the first time this year. I got no answer. How you can murder all the children and everything else without the farms around nuclear power plants. I'm confused how that works. Don't worry, Japan got your 6. They're growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags in an evacuation zone for 12 years. In the middle of 14 prefectures that were banned by 55 countries worldwide. Not Canada, but every, countries, real countries. And they got all kinds of studies saying that growing food alongside of nuclear power plants is stupid shit. You are stupid. Do you think that's an accident, or am I just being picking on the nuclear industry? The studies clearly show that it's pretty friggin' stupid to grow food alongside disease factories. Their fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation all the time into the environment, right? Let's get back to business at hand. We'll never get through it if we tell the reality. We just gotta get through the nose and blah, 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 blah. Where was I? 490, was it? Did I say 490? 89, 489. Yeah, that's where we left off. 490. Under 1,500 acres of farmland, so it be. By the end of 2024, residents in the municipality of South Bruce will decide via referendum. They already divided the community. They know where the referendum's going to go. It's going to be like, no. If they want to host 5.5 million assemblies of used fuel in a massive underground facility in prime farmland. Everything is vented, that's moved here all the way there, and then they repackage it. So they need the farmland to keep working so they don't bioaccumulate, right? And don't worry, they'll sell the food cheap. And then they'll try to treat you with more radiation, which is guaranteed to get rid of you. 97% of the people die because of radiation. Studies were saying that you're better off taking no treatment than you are taking radiation. They'll also hold a community referendum to determine the support for the project or not for the Ojibwe Nation communities. So both of them got to agree to take the nuclear waste, or we got to start over again. That's their plan, right? That's what they're up to. It's 100%. That's what they're doing. See. 3 years ago, San residents voted down the plan to bury Ontario's low and intermediate level nuclear waste near Lake Huron. Yeah, because it's one of the biggest aquifers on the entire planet, moron. But look at all the... I don't know what to say. Some of them might be anti-nuclear, you never know. It's hard to imagine. The crowd that attended day one, which is going on right now as we speak, of the South Bruce Nuclear Exploration Forum held in Teawater. It's all very technical until it's not, until you get it in yet. And so the Canadian media is just, it's a whole different level of disgusting and useless. So they talk about how Finland, oh, what's her face? From Finland. We've covered her before. Yeah, we're going to put it right there under the ground, right underneath all the farmland, Dana. They want the farms to work all year long, of course, when they're able to. So, like, if you're going to go to these meetings, it's going to be pure propaganda. Pure, 100% unadulterated propaganda. Non-stop, in-your-face propaganda. There's another useful idiot. Every town got one. Yeah, we're going to put it under the farm. You got to keep farming. We don't want you to stop. Remember that when he first bought the farmland? We covered all of that here, obviously. There's the Canadian version of the Finland's moron. That's Morton. What a disgusting parasite she turned out to be. Big surprise. Yeah, and then the First Nation doesn't know a bloody thing about it. When you listen to the video, they don't know a single thing about it. All they know is they're getting their share of the pie, and that's all that matters. So they think. Actually, you remember we covered this story last week. Or earlier this week, I think it was, on Sunday. New Brunswick Power VP's salary is closer to $1.3 million. The vice president of the nuclear power plant makes $1.3 million to murder you and your loved ones a year, not counting all the perks, all the credit lines and gas and rent and everything else that they get paid for them for free. Murder, genocide comes with a price at $1.3 million. Spokesperson says lower figure was an honest mistake because he originally came out and said it was $1 million Canadian, right? Oh, it was a honest mistake. The media's just trying to distract you. This is New Brunswick Disease Factory on the east coast of Canada. It's had nothing but problems since a $2.4 billion refurbishment in 2012. It's like $8 billion in the hole as we speak. Anyway, who cares? Main opposition urged Japan to suspend Fukushima water discharge. It hasn't stopped going into the ocean. Right, they got... And so that's why they run these types of headlines. It reinforces the propaganda from the industry that nothing has gone to the ocean. This is, of course, we've covered it so long, we're used to it, but they've never stopped dumping it into the ocean. They can't contain it. Let me explain what that means to you, because this is not really hard to wrap your mind around. This is a good model from France. This model stops after 16 days. And after 16 days, what you're going to notice is the whole planet is covered in radioactive fallout. Now, just because the model stops, that don't mean it stopped coming out of the nuclear plant. It's still hemorrhaging everywhere out of that site. Some of it's got China syndrome. So South Korea, I believe this is South Korea. Yeah, South Korea. Well, it ain't going to be North. They're not going to be reporting on that stuff. There's 70 years of demonizing North Korea, who've never attacked anybody in 70 years. They're going to get you. They got nuclear weapons. Of course they got nuclear weapons. If you were in North Korea, you would too. They burnt down every town, every village, every city, right to the ground with napalm. United Nations did, right? United Nations, which is not supposed to exist. Half the Japanese people see releases of contaminated water as lacking public interest, which is a really weird way of framing that headline, because what they meant was half the public believes that the Tokyo disease factory, which shouldn't exist, there should be the nuclear industry in charge, Tokyo don't know nothing. TEPCO don't know nothing about it. Plans to release contaminated water from the crippled nuclear meltdown this spring or summer is not in the interest of the Japanese public. Really? And this is? You covered the whole planet. How bad was Japan? Well, bad as it gets, Dana. Yes, it was. Yes, indeed it was. Oh, to be born on another planet with no nuclear anywhere. Half of Japan's people see released contaminated water as lacking. Like, it never stopped hemorrhaging out. If you fill up one of these tanks, they were all built at the same time, by the way, in 2013. And they had 1,000 tanks in 2013, 1,000 tanks in 2023. There's nothing suspicious going on there at all. And you can fill up all the tanks on site. Well, we counted them, by the way. There's only 750. But if you did have 1,000, you can fill them up 6 times a day from a single reactor. The reactors need 4,500 tons a minute, every minute. So they don't go in a runaway chain reaction. When they go into a runaway chain reaction, you need even more. The water is being poured directly on the melted reactors. Whatever's left over after detonations, the explosions, the massive fires, the China syndromes, and everything else. I can't figure out what island that was, and I forgot to do my homework. So another one of the Pacific Islands is not very happily says we're not the dumping grounds, don't dump it in the ocean, but that's all they've done. If you filled up all the tanks on or one of these tanks of just the original numbers, there's 1.4 million sieverts of beta. So we're going to conveniently pretend that gammas, alphas, and neutrons don't exist in X-rays. If you'd done that, you couldn't build another tank on site because you can't get back on the site without dying right away. If you try to filter it, you can never change the filter after 15 minutes because it's a lethal dose to be within 1,000 feet of it. But the whole planet is out there. Please don't dump it in the ocean. Eventually Japan said, okay, we won't do it. And everybody, thank goodness, we thought you were going to kill the Pacific. Thank God the nuclear industry came around. Meanwhile, your ocean has died. Thanks to Japan and 80 years of constant releases everywhere. Every nuclear reactor has fuel pools. Multiple fuel pools for each reactor. And they're hemorrhaging radiation into the environment because they're all still splitting the atoms. They have to go somewhere. There's no containment. Where do you think it's going? An Eater Guide to Tōhoku, which is a nuclear wasteland. Tōhoku is right dead center. That's Fukushima Prefecture. That's a nuclear wasteland. Where do you eat Fukushima Prefecture? Nowhere. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags in just 3% of the land because you can't clean up everything. So they only clean up spots where they wanted people to move back to and grow food in. You can't clean it up. On top of that, it's airborne and everything else is radioactive. The German economy minister calls for sanctions against countries using Russia's nuclear fuel. I actually like that. Let's just have total chaos. This is artificial inflation, right? When you had 195 countries, aka UN, which shouldn't exist, which is just a corporation, self-impose inflation, and then Russia's not going to get hurt. They're just going to sell the oil to somebody else. and the coal and everything else and the gas. So this was strictly about causing inflation worldwide. And you see all kinds of people right now can't even afford to eat because food is too expensive, gas is too expensive. They can't pick their kids up at school anymore, and they can't afford to feed them anymore because of the staged war. So German economy minister calls for sanctions against countries. So, like, where does this stop? Does if a country hosts a sports and then they allow Russian athletes in there, should they be sanctioned too? I think that's not an economy minister, that's a monster, isn't it? This story comes up a couple of times every year. Did the U.S. government nuclear testing lead the cast and crew of the Conqueror to develop cancer? Really, cancer. Yeah. Notice how he mentioned cancer constantly. There's actually 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses besides cancer. There's heart problems and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary, thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's, dementia and autism and diabetes and Down syndrome, schizophrenia. Not just cancer. This is how the brainwashing is done, though. Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Cancer is usually the last one to show up on top of it. Of course it did. They brought him in to where all the nuclear testing is done and shot a movie. And then they took 1,000 tons of the dirt, the nuclear dirt, radioactive soil, back to the studio, for goodness sakes. And they knew what they were doing at that time, right? They were well aware of what they were doing. They had no illusions about what they were doing. They had no illusions whatsoever. There is no illusions. Where are we to here? As fossil fuel emissions continue warming Earth's atmosphere. Fossil fuel. Well, the reality of it is fossil fuel doesn't travel, the emissions don't travel very far. It's nuclear emissions that covers the whole planet. Gas, oil, and coal emissions, so-called carbon, doesn't pulse energy every second for millions of years. Nuclear does. If you get rid of carbon, there's no insects or birds or plants or animals or fungus or bacteria. And if you have nuclear, there's no insects or birds or fungus or bacteria. You can't survive without carbon. If there's no carbon, then there's no life on the planet. And the amount of carbon that they're talking about, I got no idea why they keep telling that particular lie. Radiation, this one is a Neptunium-239, which decays after a couple of days, I think, to plutonium. Well, actually, Neptunium-239 has a longer half-life, don't it? I can't remember. We covered that just a few days ago. They all decay to plutonium anyway. Usually most of neptunium and americium decays within a couple of days that we talk about to plutonium. So gas, oil, and coal emissions only travel a couple of 100 miles on a really windy day. Nuclear doesn't need anyone at all. It covers the whole planet in less than a couple of weeks. It never goes away, and the endless releases just accumulate. It never goes away. So you always have more energy pulsing at the speed of light. It's offering $8 billion to entice the nation's industry, engineers, and planners to figure out how to produce and deliver clean hydrogen. So they're claiming that if you use nuclear to produce hydrogen, now it's considered renewable. Again, a nuclear power plant needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants dedicated to them for their entire existence to work. You're going to boil 1 million gallons of water a minute. Each glass would typically have 1 billion creatures in it, eggs and larvae. The Great Lakes Clean Hydrogen Coalition would produce hydrogen at the nuclear power station, Oak Harbor, the Davis-Besse nuclear power station. So the Great Lakes Clean Hydrogen Coalition, the Great Lakes Clean. So this was strictly about creating a company that sounds like an environmental company, was actually an evil, disgusting, despicable organization. That was intentional. And we see a lot of examples of, like, environmental progress. Schellenberg organization, he's a pro-nuclear lobbying group, and he calls his company Environmental Progress. It's the worst thing can happen to an environment is nuclear. Everybody and every creature on the planet is already acclimated to gas, oil, and coal emissions through genetic superior selection. Nothing has tolerance for anthropogenic man-made radiation. Great. They spent a fortune. Like they've spent more money studying uranium isotopes and daughters and everything else than you have natural elements from the solar system. It's the studies are like absurd numbers we're talking about. So they discovered a new one, 241, I believe it is, that has a half-life of 40 minutes. There's 10 half-lives because they don't bother explaining to you how that works. And they don't spend a nickel on geothermal, not a nickel. You got all the universities with nuclear nuclear courses, engineering, nuclear this, nuclear that. You don't have a single university teaching geothermal, not a single class. But almost every nuclear has to bow, get on one knee, and kiss the ring of the disgusting nuclear industry. And so these people that put all this time and all these years and energy and effort, all this government-funded, taxpayer-funded research, and they found a new uranium-231 isotope, they shouldn't be put on a pedestal. They should be, okay, well, that's good work. Now get your ass down to Fukushima and come up with some solutions. Don't come back until you fix it. In other words, go there, get sick and die. Be good little monster nuclear academics. None of them, of course, would. You couldn't drag them to Fukushima. They'd claw your eyes out. No, I don't want to go. I don't want to die. I'm a nuclear scientist. I can't go there. There's death. Tear down a once famed Oak Ridge nuclear reactor begins. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory is a great big, massive, hundreds and hundreds of square mile disease factory that's full of legacy waste from the Manhattan Project on top of that. It's also situated on one of the biggest aquifers in that part of the country that feeds around 1,800 farms down river. On top of this, every facet of these facilities were meant to do as much damage as possible without coming up with a solution. A once famous reactor, at the massive disease factory known as Oak Ridge National Laboratory, is in the process of being torn down. And did you know Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management Cleanup? They're a word for, we don't do jack shit. We just wash it out into the local rivers. We couldn't care less about you. Known as Building 305, became famous in 1951 when some useful idiot captured the blue glow caused by radiation in the pool above the reactor. I have nothing but contempt for these people after all these years of covering this. We gotta go back to the day of Judge Roy Bean, where if they were bandits, we hung them right on the spot. And these people are bandits. Goal to demolish the structures surrounding the reactor, remove and sample additional shield blocks to support waste disposal. Sample additionals. This is one great big stupid disease factory. And look what they're doing. They don't even build a cover over to contain the emissions. Monticello is back out there. More propaganda. What a disgusting... If you go watch the video in this one here. I can't use it because of copyright, right? But if you go watch it, I'll walk you through it. Late last year, a leak... So they're calling, and they got hundreds of thousands of gallons instead of 400,000 gallons. It was actually most likely several million gallons, not 1.5 million liters, but more like 5 million or 5 billion liters. They waited till 4 months after the releases before they said anything, so there's no way anybody can check downstream of the Mississippi and figure out what happened. And then when they finally broke the news, they had already had all the public relation firms ready to go. They come out and told the story. And then they invited everybody in. They had all the placards ready. What was really interesting was Chris Clark, the president, we call him Clark, was there himself of Excel. I've never heard tell of the president of the energy company showing up personally to tell the lie. So he didn't even trust his useful idiots to get out and regurgitate the lies. And they've been there telling everybody it's like tritium. No, it's just tritium. And it's from a high pressure between, like the walls on the buildings are 2 feet thick on each side. That's the containment area. They still won't tell you exactly which buildings they are though. And so that meant that this is plutonium, and uranium, and americium, and neptunium, and curium products. There's no zero pipes on that property when it leaks is going to be tritiated water. There's zero. And he never stops. And that piece of shit over there with the white blouse on, that scum, that dirtbag bitch. Chris Clark, he hasn't got he never lost a single hair. Look, he had a pretty red nose though that last time we seen him. He was drinking on the sly in the morning before he went to work. Everything is downhill a couple of 100 feet to the Mississippi River. Frozen ground, but oh no, everything stayed on site. We got it all. Don't worry about it. Go back to sleep. Don't listen to Dana. And so they waited 4 months before they told anybody. Do you really think 400,000, 10,000 45-gallon drums is going to stay on top of the frozen ground? You think it's not going to run straight down into the Mississippi, which is what it's designed to do, by the way? Right, they grade these places before they build them specifically to do that. So Clark, right, if I had the right organization, we could sue them and get the information and find out what really happened, right? Instead, we got no organizations out there, period, anywhere on the entire planet that is trying to get to the bottom of this. And so the fact that this disgusting, despicable, revolting parasite done another interview and 12 minutes of talking about tritium. Not even tritium 3H, but just tritium, and claiming that it's produced naturally in the environment, so don't worry about it. If he was here, I'd kick the shit out of him the minute I see him. I wouldn't even hesitate for 2 seconds. I'd kick the shit out of him the minute I laid eyes on him. and probably kick her teeth down her throat too if I ever come across it. Which is not true. She deserved. If I was a girl, I would do it. But I'm not a girl, so I wouldn't do it. If I was a girl, though, I'd kick the shit out of that so quick you wouldn't imagine it. I know it's illegal, but that's what her parents should have done with her when she was born, is kick the shit out of her, make sure she never got involved in anything like this. These are revolting mass murderers. These are mass murderers. These got no human attributes whatsoever. Speaking of no human attributes whatsoever, Montana nuclear missiles about to undergo a big transformation. Well, why is all that in the media? Because Montana, which is on the Canadian border, British Columbia, what they're doing is they're making a big fuss, right? All the nuclear weapons are right here. They're right here. So if there is a shooting war with the Ruskies or anybody else, they're going to flatten Montana, right? That's what it's all about. You got a big bullseye painted on Montana. And every time I see somebody in a uniform like that, I just want to go up and spit in their face. They're the farthest thing from a human you're going to find. Inflation leads Oyster Creek nuclear plant to delay decommissioning because Chris Singh, piece of shit Chris Singh from Holtec, because of the inflation, he's burning through his profits, right? So he's going to, well, first off, he just wanted to zip through the decommissioning so he can make a profit. And because of inflation, he's just going to wait. It typically takes 50 or 60 years to decommission it. Chris Singh says he can do it in 10 years. And everything left over is profit, right? Big disease factories. EDF established new work subsidy, we talked about this earlier in the week, by the way, to boost small modular reactor development. These reactors are not small. These don't meet any of the qualifications of what considered a small modular reactor. And it's Nuclear Engineering International, and they've never put their name on a story. They're a lobbying group for the nuclear industry, right? How's the poll doing tonight? Is Clark there yet? And thumb this down? No. Is carbon-free and net zero? I put the N in the wrong spot, I noticed. Too late. Is carbon-free and net zero nuclear a scam to prop up the failing disease factory known as nuclear power plants worldwide? Well, yeah, actually it is. EDF, which all their reactors in France, which is French government, by the way, all their reactors in France are decrepit, right? Half the fleet last summer was down the whole summer. They don't got no water to run it. You can't drink water and run the reactors in France because 70% of the water goes to nuclear. And by the way, all nuclear power plants in France are surrounded by farms, particularly the La Hague, or their reprocessing mixed oxide fuel facility. La Hague, is it? I can't remember the name for some reason, right? Brain is finally fried. Day 5. Forget renewables, the U.S. should go nuclear. There was a lot of work to do this show today, for some reason, to find all the stories. These are all today's stories, right? It's an absurd amount of work to find all of this stuff on. Then you got to get everything organized, and then you got to tell the story, right? That's all good. But there was so much. There was so much nonsense from the nuclear industry that I didn't want to cover. Look at a story here. Forget renewable. This is Washington Examiner. Forget renewable. The U.S. should go nuclear. and we've covered this creature a few times. Recently, Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez took to Instagram and offered some nuanced thoughts about nuclear power. Her observations raised eyebrows since she was leading to sponsor the Green New Deal legislation that would have crushed nuclear power in the country, and that failed, and now she's pro-nuclear. So she took that in order for it to fail so nuclear could exist, right? And claiming for getting renewables, the Americans took them 44 years to get Watts Bar up and running, for goodness sakes. Right? Number 2. And the other reactor, the Volg reactor, Westinghouse went bankrupt, for goodness sakes, and got bought up by scumbag Brookfield from Canada, which are got nothing to do with nuclear, but now apparently are experts. Nuclear reactor shut down a Teesside power plant after fault discovery, surrounded by farms. That's totally coincidence. EDF in France. Electrical system fault. All the reactors are old, right? They were built on flawed technology, ideology, and it's come back to haunt them. And like the reactors they're building in other countries are flops. Endless over budget, relentlessly over budget, brutally years and years and years behind schedule. Crowd turns out for town hall on plutonium pits and nuclear waste storage. They could solve the nuclear waste storage anytime they want. But what they're doing, they do the same thing in the United Kingdom, by the way, and in Australia, where they say, well, we got to get the consent of the farmlands before we can put it there. There's no coincidence in that conversation. And so they know usually they're going to come up with resistance because they're going to create it anyway, so they can't do it. Oh, too bad, we got to go look somewhere else, but we better make sure, so it'll take another couple of years, see if they change their minds. If not, what's a poor scumbag supposed to do? We'll go look at another spot. It'll only take another decade. And so they throw millions and millions of dollars around in these little communities to create the divide. Like, the whole story is insane. How are you supposed to have a future with these people on our planet? There was a couple of anti-nuclears showed up. Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Los Alamos. Like, Los Alamos legacy is holy shit stuff. Yeah. How's everybody doing tonight? Good night, everybody. We have a little boo here. I'm sure there's hi, Stephen. Stephen Young. I think I forgot to shout out Stephen last night when I done a shout out, because I don't get all the comments on my side. By the time it only handles so many comments because the show's 2 hour long. The original comments are usually not going to be there when I get to the end of the video. Hi, everybody. Just scrolling down quickly to see if there's anything yelling out at me. Looks good. Let's keep it rolling here. Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Los Alamos. There's hardly an empty seat in the auditorium. 150 others attended the town hall virtually. One attendee expressed concern about the health and safety. One attendee. which is probably accurate, by the way. The industry likes to take all the seats from themselves, right? So there's nothing but support. Country avoided large-scale pit production since the 80s and early 90s. So why are they making new bombs anyway? They can't use them. It's about the industry, right? Keeping the misery machine in second gear so that you got to burn money on it constantly. Anti-neutrino detection breakthrough. This is scary stuff, folks. Using pure water captures a single from a nuclear power plant 150 miles away. This is isolated, and they're using special water, so there's no radiation in the water. And then they're going to detect a single from a nuclear plant 150 miles away. And so this is why they do sex ratio studies around nuclear power plants, because everybody got poisoned. Everybody. And that's why they do a study looking for more males than females around nuclear power plants, because it's easy to show it, see? Because everybody got poisoned, which means all the species did too. Antineutrinos have the opposite charge of a neutrino, and both subatomic particles are among the basic building blocks of matter. Particular interest, physicists believe antineutrinos can be useful assets in the detection monitoring of nuclear reactors. Let me see what I'm looking for here. Lots of this is just like for a record, more so for me than to talk about. Practical application can be used to monitor nuclear reactors from far distances. Which means everybody's getting exposed. As such, nuclear reactors produce large amounts of antineutrinos. And they can even tell whether the reactor is on or off from long distances away. A reactor as far away as 150 miles requires at least 100 tons of water so they can find... So, this is terrible news that they can find that. Oh, looks like I forgot the headline of that story. Micro small modular reactors. Hang on. It's down below anyway. 30 megawatt. So why not use geothermal? Why would you use micro small modular reactor? By the way, they don't have a design in. There's a lot of stories today about small reactors, micro reactors. This is about robbing you and stopping you from coming up with solutions for energy for the future. Right? So if there's a nuclear power plant involved anywhere on the planet and it's supposed to be shutting down soon, so they should replace it, and they already got the money because you pay energy bills, right? They won't replace it because then they'll have to shut down a nuclear power plant. So the normal trick that we've seen constantly over the years is they say, well, we got nothing to replace it. But they had the money. They had the time. They had everything they needed. They had the authority, everything else. But they refused to build something to replace it because it would mean you'd have to turn off the nuclear reactors. So well, you're going to have to, like, you've been around for a while, you know this stuff anyway, right? But I just got to remind you that this is the evilness of the industry. Once nuclear creeps into your portfolio, it rules everything. It's more important than everything. And it's because it releases, the fuels and the pools are releasing so much radiation, they know they're sterilizing all the species and humans within 1,000 miles. And that's why they don't want to replace it, because they want to produce more fuel. They want to exterminate every species on the planet. Nothing else makes sense, right? It really doesn't. So to generate steam, why not use geothermal? You haven't got a single university on the entire planet working on geothermal. It's not an accident. It's because nuclear industry has destroyed everybody's future on purpose. This is 100% on purpose. Oh, look at this one. Former Israel Prime Minister confirmed on Twitter, I think it was, or Facebook or something, that Israel has nuclear weapons. This is the first time we've ever heard anything like that. What are they up to that they actually now? Because usually they refuse to acknowledge it, right? Apparently they're busy today. Now they're bombing the lab rats they got in Gaza. Because Israel's the fourth biggest weapons producer on the planet. They tried all their nuclear or new weapons on the children in Gaza. They got 5.5 million refugees they keep in refugee camps surrounded by guards, Israeli guards with German shepherds. But they can't seem to get rid of the 10,000 Hamas. They can't seem to kill them either. 10,000 Hamas, 10,000 Mujahideen, 10,000 Taliban, 10,000 ISIS, 10,000 Boko Haram. There's no patterns at all. Nuclear Engineering International, aka Degenerate Scum, swapping steam generators at Watts Bar. The steam generator at Watts Bar, by the way, this is only 6 years old. I'm sorry, it's only been running for 6 years. It took them 44 years to build a reactor. And because it's built with old technology, well, gee, look at that. You only got to run for a couple of years. We got to change the steam generator. Oh, well, shit happens. No, you knew that when you built it. When you wasted all that money on restoring this old decrepit facility that you had. You were well aware of what you were doing. Japan's nuclear watchdog halts Tsuruga reactor safety assessment again because they filed all kinds of fake paperwork. They were polite and called it errors, right? There was errors in there, but it was fake paperwork. Nuclear non-regulatory agencies said Wednesday, non-regulatory nuclear agencies, because they don't regulate jack shit. It was a total shock that they even done this. Will again halt the safety assessment of the offline central Japanese reactor after its operator repeatedly submitted documents containing false information, aka errors. It was false information. Hey, welcome to nuclear. La 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 la. We're getting there. New Scale, which doesn't exist, doesn't have a reactor, been around for 18 years, still don't even have an application, told the entire application into the regulatory agencies. They got rubber stamped, but they can't build a reactor because they don't have the design. They can't evaluate it. They don't have the design in there. They can't build it. They don't have the actual design into the regulatory agencies. The small, and then they're talking as if everything is hunky dory and blah 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 blah. We follow this every single week for years and years and years. There is no small modular reactors. There is no design in. Right, there is no million pieces of paper that the regulatory agencies are shifting through, looking for discrepancies so they can redesign it. You know, because it's a new reactor, right? And what that means is you got to build one, then you got to get the kinks out of it, then you got to build another one. You got to redesign it, and build one without all the flaws into it, and probably got to do it again after that. And so, meanwhile, no other technology is allowed to exist. Well, we're going to sign a memorandum of understanding for something that don't exist. We'll exclude all the other technologies. Every time I hear the word, and they say when there was only chocolate and vanilla. The first 50 years of commercial nuclear power industry in the United States was similar to ice cream choices, when there was only chocolate and vanilla. Can you actually believe somebody said that? Well, it was about nuclear, so it shouldn't really surprise you, I suppose. Camco, which shouldn't exist, and Bruce Power, which definitely shouldn't exist, celebrate an extension of long-term arrangements for nuclear fuel through 2040. Bruce Power, when Fukushima melted down, they shook down the Canadian taxpayers for $12–14 billion for a couple of their reactors at two different sites. So almost $30 billion before the Canadians woke up and found out what happened, right? And so Canada has been destroyed by the nuclear industry since the 70s, probably the 50s and 60s in reality, right? And they've throttled, they removed all restrictions in Japanese food after 93 days, while the rest of the world banned it for over a decade. So Japan could only ship the food to Canada, so everybody got poisoned. Building a path to net zero. Oh my God, not net zero. Well, we're talking about Canada, right? So get your vomit bags ready. Carbon-free nuclear energy. Clean air. Climate change. Carbon-free. Safe. Clean. Cleaner. Net zero. Clean. 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 Safe. Carbon free. Do you see any patterns? Or is that just me? Scumbags never took a day off, I noticed. Transforming nuclear waste into a 1,000-year energy solution. This was an environmental company, corporate organization in Europe that wants to environmental campaign group Replanet propose innovative solution to repurpose nuclear waste as fuel. That's not an innovative solution. Donneray in United Kingdom, Sellafield, United Kingdom, La Hague in France, Miyagi in Russia, been doing it for 60 years. France is almost all its reactors are running on mixed oxide fuel. And potentially providing zero carbon. This is why we got a poll tonight, by the way, because you hear this zero carbon. Is carbon-free, net zero, nuclear scam to prop up the failing disease factories known as nuclear power? But of course it is, Dana. Well, there's unusual. We got 38 votes and 38 thumbs up. What the hell is going on in the world today? Let's keep going. But nuclear waste poses more of a political challenge than an environmental threat. So this is an environmental campaign group saying that nuclear is the way to go, and mixed oxide fuel at that. So the nuclear industry created the group just to do that. And of course the media is only happy to cut your throat and shit down in your neck. Totally happy to do it. No issues. Zero carbon. Get ready for your puke fest again. Zero carbon. Carbon free. Net zero. Net zero would facilitate deployment of wind and solar. Net zero. You guessed it. Carbon. Carbon free. Net zero. So this is where we got that poll tonight, right? Is carbon free and net zero nuclear a scam to prop up the failing disease factories known as nuclear power plants? Well, yes it is, Dana. Where wind, solar, and nuclear power works together to create a sustainable, eco-friendly future. You notice that somebody tried to give me that wasn't sure if they gave me a thumbs up or not, and they took their thumb away. Now I only got 37. We just had 38. What are you doing to me? I'm just kidding you. Saskatchewan Power holding a nuclear power information event in Lucky Lake. What you mean unlucky lake? It's got to do with nuclear. That's going to be pretty unlucky. So Saskatchewan Power has signed a memorandum of understanding with a small modular reactor fabled dinosaur unicorn / stupid company about the future of nuclear power in the area. They're going to build a small modular reactor as early as 2024, but you haven't even got a design into the regulatory agencies, your million pieces of paper. So that's going to take you 3, 4, 5 years for them to get through it before you can even dream of building something. And it can't be an actual station because it's the first one ever built. You got to get the kinks out of it. No, we're going to do it in 2024, next year, Dana. Yeah, I'm sure you are. But, and they're going to exclude everything else. And they're never going to have it, period. Renewables have kicked the shit out of nuclear in the last couple of years in particular. Like 600 to 1. Sites being considered for the fabled, stupid, ridiculous, don't exist, small modular reactor moron machines. Estevan and Elbow. Again, it doesn't exist. You don't even have a... You don't even have a cartoon drawing into the regulatory agencies, let alone the actual engineering schematics. We see that over and over and over, don't we? Doesn't stop the media from screaming it's going to solve everything. Your children will never have pimples again. And the list goes on. Don't mislead on waste plans. Canadian Nuclear Society. Why bother, right? I didn't. Orano, which is France, which used to be Areva, and went bankrupt, which was the French government, said he wouldn't be responsible for fuel rods for the next million years. Then he started up another company, in name only, kept the same building, switched, never even changed the phone number or the mailing address, and then just relabeled it Orano. And they're talking about the Canadian project and the Canadian mining company, the MIRAD Uranium Corporation, who we've only covered a couple of times in the last couple of years. It'll invest $115 million. French will in the Canadian nuclear fields, uranium fields, rather. Never fails to disappoint is all I can say. It was Areva, was their predecessor, which went bankrupt and got rid of all their responsibilities. Then just changed the name of the company, left the company right where it was, never fired anybody. Never even lost a day's work. Because that's the government, right? Government can do whatever it wants. It doesn't have to be accountable to anything or anybody. So it's not. Its officials are trying to brainwash the public about Fukushima. It's very scary. Many experts now believe the government officials covered up the true extent of the public health risk from radiation. Bear with me. It's hard to imagine something more frightening than 5-year-olds marching off to radiated school playgrounds with Geiger counters, which wasn't even Geiger counters, these were dosimeters you couldn't read, strapped around their neck. Date City. They never stopped growing food there, by the way. Or all the communities, right? All the radioactive communities. Let me see if I can find something for you. Oh me, oh my, I think I'm gonna cry. Me, oh my. Bear with me. I know roughly words too. Maybe. Oh, well, there you go. La La Land. There we go. I just want to give you an idea how actual bad Japan is. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. Unless you're around here regularly, then it's not so bad. Absorbed average dose to red bone marrow for adults. Now, there's similar ones for children too, right? It's from the United Nations Scientific Committee, United Nations, who I vehemently despise, by the way. They're not supposed to exist. They have no authority in any country, yet every country does exactly whatever they're told by the United Nations, which Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex because 195 militaries, and George Bush Sr. called the New World Order. Average disposition density of cesium on the soil. Of course, they're only going to acknowledge cesium. So these scientists, there should be, you know, everybody in their community should be legally allowed to slap them every time they see them. So all of these communities to your left, the second row is the population of those communities. The third row, which is this one here, is the Becquerel's physical atoms, decays per square meter per second. So you got all these communities to your left. Date City is 147,000 atomic decays per second per square meter of just gamma, of just cesium, as if uranium, plutonium doesn't exist in all the byproducts, which is over 1,000 of them. So as you start going down, you start seeing all these communities that are nuclear wastelands. Right? You see that? These are all nuclear wastelands. So it shows you the industry don't give a shit about anybody. And that the fact that it was able to do something like that, and that they only acknowledge cesium, you want to multiply that by 600 to get the real numbers. If that doesn't concern you, you should hang around for a while. We'll get you there. Fukushima new blueprint for terrorists. All you need to do is cut off power to a nuclear disease factory, aka nuclear power plant. 12 million yen spent to censor Twitter, which is about 56,000 US by Japanese nuclear industry. Japan government nuclear industry is funding projects to monitor online info about Fukushima, around-the-clock monitoring of blogs on nuclear power and Twitter accounts. So, like, should we monitor them around the clock too? Because we should. Kyoto major meeting in Japan. Radiation forecast can by no means be released to the public. Shows radioactive cloud could spread over Tokyo. They've done something like 5,500 speedy models, which is a computer program for radioactive fallout. And they gave it to the American military, but they didn't give it to the citizens, so they couldn't get it out of harm's way. On purpose. I showed you the communities, right? That's just a fraction of them, by the way, that are nuclear wastelands. They're not fit to be into. Not even for a visit. Not even for 2 minutes. Another major media. Public outcry over Japan's government monitoring tweets and blog posts. Japan expert. The government may have delayed the level 7 ratings to ease people into the harshness of the reality. So, like, if they had sirens around the plant, there's zero possibility they're going to use them, see? So if they have an accident, there's zero possibility they're going to let people get out of harm's way. It's zero. Why are you tolerating that? This is why the industry is falling apart, because their 80 years of this is finally broke the planet's back. Global warming is radioactive fallout. 80 years of constant emissions from fuel pools. All fuel pools are hemorrhaging into the environment. Tokyo Vice Governor suggested a Fukushima draft. So there was another draft where people 60 and older should be prepared to die at the nuclear power plant because it broke down, you know. Irresponsible rumor claims Fukushima spent fuel pool reactor 4 exploded. Not according to Helen Caldicott, the greatest activist in the world. She says it looks like the building to the left, not the building to the right. I put the video up in the center of these two pictures. But reactor 4 is to the right. They're both the official pictures, by the way. But only one of them is actually...
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of building 4, and it does look pristine.
Now, I'll go back to this one. Irresponsible rumor claims Fukushima spent fuel pool exploded. Does it look like it exploded to you on the right? Or am I just being nitty? Am I just nitpicking? So it doesn't look like the building on... Right? This is the real building, not over there. But they're both the official pictures. Helen Caldicott says it looks like that one. She wrote 14 anti-nuclear books. She has 29,000 doctors signed on to Physicians for Social Responsibility to be anti-nuclear. And she's hoodwinking everything and everybody on purpose. And it never stops, though, in the nuclear industry. Radiation forecast withheld by the government. Releasing would cause unnecessary panic. Unnecessary panic. You have no right to a future because the nuclear industry is going to make damn sure of it. Oh, they already have. But you got to do what we can. We can't just pretend. We can't just keep them doing what they're doing. We owe it to the future generation, if there is one, and to the species that might survive this, to at least try, right? That's what I do anyway. That's how I see it. We have to try. And so my theory was, if I have an educational program, after a couple of years, there'd be lots of people would be up to speed on all the certain facets of this conversation. Boy, was I wrong. Ho, ho, ho. I was pretty gullible. I was pretty gullible. It's true. I admit it now. How naive was I? Radiation forecast withheld by the government releasing would cause panic. The ministry decided such data would be unavailable because they would lose power. Because people would run away. So well, we can't tell them people will run away. And we won't have a job being officials and authorities no more. Radiation forecast in Japan was kept secret to avoid panic in the whole of society. Well, what about the rest of the world? This is TEPCO's numbers, by the way. Of plutonium, no less. Former Prime Minister Khan, evacuation after Fukushima could have reached 50 million people if Reactor 4 blew up. So they're saying that never happened. If it did happen, they would have to evacuate 50 million people. Why would you want that on your planet? Why would you want that in your community or your city or your country? How does that work? How can the nuclear industry not know all of this stuff? Well, they do. They revel in it. This is their Bible, actually. Japanese government withheld radiation forecast to prevent causing panic. That's not a government, that's a bunch of murderers, right? Prime Minister contemplated evacuating 30 million from Tokyo. He couldn't do it because he feared mass panic. He wanted to do it, he was supposed to do it, but he couldn't do it because, you know, mass panic. They can't neglect the truth because they fear a panic outbreak. No, they done that specifically. Did you know that you don't have to have a leak, or crack, or fail for the fuel to overheat? You just got to stop the circulation in the fuel pool for it to degrade and become a vicious threat to humanity and the 8 million species, because it is. They said the risk is minimal in the no-go zone where everybody's evacuated. He said it's like 12 hours in a plane. 12 hours in an airplane. $12. They equated being in a nuclear wasteland to flying on an airplane for 12 hours. It's hard to believe there's people that evil. It really is. And I've been doing this for just forever, and it blows me away there's people that are actually that evil. That's Washington Post, of course. Washington Post is supreme at being evil. Stanford Publications were TV experts paid to say that the Fukushima Daiichi was a small leak when in fact it was the largest in the world. I don't know, let's ask the 865,000 extra cancer patients in 2012. By the way, cancer is just one of 1,800 diseases you're going to get. And not everybody in Japan has health care or got diagnosed. Japan officials says delay in raising Fukushima to a level 7 was because we could have triggered a panic. Well, you probably suppose you should have, shouldn't you? Wasn't that what you were supposed to do? Well, yeah, the panic would have been worldwide, right? And appropriately. Well, we never got another thumb up on my video. I got 38. Google shut that down. The lobbyists at Google, I guess. Well, there you go. We survived another day of the scumbag nuclear energy industry. Wrecking it for everybody else. If you made it this far, consider giving me a thumbs up. We're going to close the poll. Is carbon-free and net zero nuclear scam a hoax to prop up the failing disease factory known as nuclear power? That's a big yes. That's a great big affirmative. Oh, we shot up to 40 thumbs up. Well, thank you very much. You saw God. So, unless there's an earthquake, we're expecting an earthquake, right? In Japan, right in front of Fukushima's destroyed reactor buildings. So they had massive earthquakes, but it never ever caused any more damage. It damaged, 5,000 schools all the way to Tokyo, but it didn't damage the reactors 30 miles away. There's reactor 3 and 4. There was no damage to them, but it damaged 5,000 schools, filed insurance claims. Pin the tail on the fuel pool, win $1 billion. I'll give you $1 billion if you can find a fuel pool. Dana, you ain't got $1 billion. Well, I don't need it. There's no fuel pool. Who's laughing now? Thanks, Dana and Asana. Appreciate the moderating. We appreciate it. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Great day the day after that, which is Saturday, I think. And a great day the day after that, which is Sunday. And I hope you have a really good day on Sunday and feel real good all day Sunday. So you come back and watch this show on Sunday night. Kevin Blanche. Hi, Kevin. Yeah, Kevin was on Sunday night's show for an hour and 45 minutes. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Thank you, everybody. We made it through. Can't believe we made it through. Thank you, James. I'm just going to do shit to thank you again for helping you again this week. It was amazing. Port Angeles, yeah. Albert. Good night, everybody. Peaceware. I guess it won't hurt me to shout out everybody now that I'm started. Blue Jay, not. Did I say Albert yet? Until laid it down again. Stephen Young was here. I seen that earlier. Hi, Stephen. Hugs, my friend. Blue Jay Outpost, Randy. And it was a long day today trying to find all these stories. I would describe it as a brutal day, actually. Sandra Wolf Churchill, a quick shout out before we call it a night. My eyesight's really bad tonight. I don't know why. It's nasty. Yeah, I forgot about an insurance payment I had coming up on Monday, so I was lucky we raised the extra money because I have so many expenses, right? We're struggling for so many years. We never really struggled until you took down my site. When I was out looking for spiders 2 years ago and reporting that the spiders were gone, they took down my whole YouTube with 24,200 subscribers that I had for 4 years. I had 24,200 subscribers for 4 years straight. Never gained one, never lost one. No censorship at all. John Shiflett. I'm almost through the names, so I'll come back to the most recent in a moment. Just making sure I didn't miss anybody. I always seem to miss somebody whenever I do a shout out. And I'm feeling pretty good. We're 4 weeks or so now after surgery. I got got 7 stents put in from heart surgery. After 20 days in intensive care unit. That was hellish. And so I'm starting to feel pretty darn good. I'm afraid to say that out loud, right? Don't want to jinx myself. Another month though, and I'll be considered good to do things, whatever I want to, basically. I'm just not going to do anything for another month, like strenuous, right? I am considering putting the boat in the water next week or the week after. We'll see what the weather does, right? We got to try to find... I got a problem with the motor that I got to deal with, of course. There's always problems with everything. These are stressful problems, right? Did I get everybody? I think so. Let's go down to the most recent comments. Angel Place. I know Colette is out there somewhere. I haven't seen Swanee D in the last couple of months. I know he wasn't doing that good. I hope he's okay. Just double check and shout it out to everybody. Looks good. You made it. See everybody on Sunday. Providing there's no... If there's an earthquake, I'll be doing a stream before then, right? We're overdue for a massive earthquake right out in front of Fukushima, nuclear disaster, nuclear meltdown, destroyed reactors, blah, blah, blah. So we're worried sick about it. Because the longer it is after the anniversary, it seems like the bigger the earthquake is. And so the last 2 years were around 5 billion. We're around 5 billion. Who cares? We'll see everybody on Sunday. Have a great night and a great weekend. Hugs for everybody. Thank you. Good night, everybody. We'll see everybody.